Frontline Updates, where we delve deep into military strategies and updates from conflict zones. Today, we're discussing the progress of the ongoing special military operation as of today. I'm your host, Sharifa Mohammed MGT.
I'm Colonel AUC3I, an infantry officer.
At midnight hours on May 8th, Russian forces implemented a theater-wide ceasefire in observance of the 81st victory anniversary, halting offensive action and holding in place. Ukrainian forces recorded 1,630 violations during the Armistice, employing UAV and artillery strikes against Russian positions and civilian infrastructure in Belgorod and Kursk regions. Russian units responded with proportional counterbattery fire, targeting MLRS, artillery, mortar positions, and UAV launch sites. The ceasefire, while nominally enduring, quickly reverted to an active kinetic exchange, demonstrating limited mutual confidence and underscoring the instrumentality of operational pauses in shaping the information environment.
Welcome to Frontline Updates, the podcast that brings you in-depth insights into military operations from those leading them on the ground. Today, we're joined by Colonel AUC3I, an infantry officer monitoring critical missions on the progress of the special military operation as of today. Colonel AUC3I, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Colonel, let's start with the Armistice. At midnight on May 8th, Russian forces declared a complete cessation of combat activity and held in place. Yet your report records 1,630 ceasefire violations by Ukraine. Can you walk us through what happened operationally during that supposed pause and how your forces responded?
The Russian command's decision to observe a ceasefire on the 81st anniversary of victory was both a political and a military signal. From an operational standpoint, all Russian groupings went firm on their previously occupied lines. That means no forward movement, no offensive fires initiated by us. What occurred instead was a systematic probing by the Ukrainian side. Artillery, mortar, and unmanned aerial vehicle strikes directed against our positions and, critically, against civilian infrastructure in the border regions of Belgorod and Kursk. Those 1,630 violations are not a minor statistical footnote. They represent a deliberate armed attempt to exploit a pause. The armed forces of the Russian Federation therefore exercised what doctrine describes as a proportionate, in-kind response. Our counterbattery systems, reconnaissance-strike complexes, and artillery immediately returned fire on identified firing points, multiple launch rocket system positions.
And before that armistice, your report notes 6 group strikes between 2 and 8 in May, using long-range precision weapons and attack drones against Ukraine's defense industry, fuel, port infrastructure, airfields, and ammunition depots. Could you unpack the logic of that deep strike campaign and how aviation fits into it?
This is the campaign-shaping domain. Ground maneuver does not happen in isolation. It must be prefaced and accompanied by a systemic dismantling of the enemy's ability to sustain frontline formations. Over that week, the Russian armed forces integrated air-launched and ground-launched high-precision systems, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and large numbers of one-way attack drones to hit targets deep in the operational and strategic rear. The target set is telling. Defense industrial enterprises that produce or repair equipment, fuel storage that feeds armored columns, port infrastructure used for military logistics, airfields from which Ukrainian manned and unmanned platforms operate, and the depots of ammunition and attack drones that directly enable the tactical fight. When a mechanized brigade runs short of fuel or 155mm shells, its combat effectiveness collapses long before it meets our forward troops.
Let's move sector by sector and start in the north. The Sever Group seized Miropoli in the Sumy region. What is the operational significance of that town? And what does the engagement array tell you about the Ukrainian order of battle on that axis?
Miropoli sits inside the buffer zone we have been expanding along the border to push Ukrainian long-range fires, tube artillery, MLRS, and FPV drone launch sites farther from Russian territory, particularly from Belgorod and Kursk. Taking it is less about the town's own infrastructure and more about denying the Ukrainian armed forces a stable staging area from which they can conduct systematic cross-border strikes. The enemy grouping Sever faced was a dense mosaic of 5 mechanized brigades, 2 motorized infantry brigades, an air assault brigade, an airmobile brigade, an assault regiment, 4 territorial defense brigades, a National Guard brigade, and a border detachment. That array tells me the Ukrainian command is attempting to fuse regular heavy formations with lighter territorial and National Guard units to hold a broad front on the cheap. The presence of airmobile and air assault elements suggests they still harbor intentions for a rapid counterattack.
Is the primary task there the security zone, or are you fixing forces that would otherwise reinforce other sectors?
It is both, and that is deliberate. Operational art requires that one axis perform multiple roles concurrently. Sever's immediate mission is the buffer zone, but the sheer number of Ukrainian brigades engaged, over a dozen, even if many are under strength, means those formations cannot be rotated south to face center or east without leaving gaps. By maintaining continuous fire pressure, Sever pins territorial defense and National Guard troops in place, compelling the Ukrainian General Staff to feed scarce artillery and electronic warfare assets into a direction where they suffer a net negative exchange rate. The 98 motor vehicles lost in a week is an extraordinary figure for a secondary axis. It tells me their forward supply chain is being systematically dismantled, which has an operational impact far beyond the geographic sector.
West Group of Forces appears to have inflicted heavy equipment losses, but didn't report new terrain captured. How would you characterize its role during this period?
West Group performed the classical function of a holding and attrition grouping. On this axis, we do not necessarily need a rapid advance. We need to bleed the Ukrainian forces arrayed against it. 4 mechanized brigades, an assault brigade, a dedicated UAV regiment, territorial defense, and National Guard. The result was the neutralization of more than 1,345 personnel, 25 armored fighting vehicles, and critically, 153 motor vehicles and 20 electronic warfare and counterfire stations. When you see electronic warfare losses of that magnitude, 20 stations, that represents a serious degradation of the enemy's electromagnetic shield. Without effective EW, Ukrainian formations become transparent and vulnerable to our reconnaissance-strike loop. The high motor vehicle losses similarly are a sign that we are succeeding in intercepting their rear area resupply columns before they reach the line of contact. West's fight is one of culmination.
South Group liberated Krivaya Luka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The reported enemy loss list includes German-made Marder, Italian Puma, and American M113 vehicles. What does that mix suggest about the state of Ukraine's mechanized force? And what did the seizure of Krivaya Luka provide operationally?
Krivaya Luka is a junction settlement that unlocks further movement along the road network toward the remainder of the DPR territory. Its liberation denies the armed forces of Ukraine a fortified anchor point in that sector. The engagement spanned an unusually diverse enemy array. 4 mechanized, a motorized infantry, an airmobile, an assault, a mountain assault, a marine brigade, a territorial defense, and a National Guard. When a single operational grouping faces that many sorts of formations in a small area, it indicates the adversary is assembling a patchwork defense from whatever is operationally available. Some units were clearly rushed in as composite barriers. The loss of 19 armored fighting vehicles, including a Marder infantry fighting vehicle, a Puma armored personnel carrier, and an M113, tells a story of forced substitution. Ukraine is fielding a mix of Soviet legacy armor and a scattered collection of Western-supplied platforms, which creates a logistical nightmare.
Center Group reported the highest enemy troop losses this week, over 2,130, while engaging a broad spectrum of units, from Jaeger to Marine and National Guard brigades. What operational problem is Center Group solving?
Center Group is solving the problem of mass. When I look at the enemy order of battle, 5 mechanized brigades, a motorized infantry brigade, a Jaeger brigade, 2 airmobile, an assault, an airborne brigade, an assault regiment, 2 Marine brigades, and 5 National Guard brigades, I see a deliberate attempt by Ukrainian command to create a dense, layered defensive belt. Center's role is not necessarily to blast through it in a single audacious thrust. It is to degrade that density methodically by inflicting 2,130 casualties, destroying 34 armored fighting vehicles, 62 motor vehicles, 16 artillery guns, and 9 electronic warfare stations in a single week. Center Group is executing what we might call a creaming off strategy. It fixes the bulk of the enemy's heavy forces and destroys them incrementally, so they cannot maneuver to shore up a crisis elsewhere.
On that note, East Group was described as continuing to advance into the depth of the enemy's defense, with more than 2,055 enemy losses. What kind of formations did they encounter? And what does the advance into depth entail from an infantry officer's perspective?
East Group confronted an enemy that had been stripped of much of its defensive padding. 2 mechanized brigades, an assault brigade, 3 air assault brigades, and 4 assault regiments. That is a highly aggressive orbit. Air assault and assault regiments are primarily light infantry strike formations designed for offensive or counteroffensive action, not for holding a static line. That they were thrown in front of an advancing Vostok group indicates Ukrainian command lacks sufficient heavy mechanized units on this axis and is relying on light, high-tempo forces to contain a breach. From an infantry commander's perspective, advancing into depth means you have ruptured the tactical defensive zone and are now engaging the second echelon reserves and rear area support elements. Vehicle loss ratios: 24 armored fighting vehicles but 47 motor vehicles. Tell me we're hitting their logistics echelons and command transport.
Dnieper Group's report notes an improvement of the tactical situation, but comparatively lower personnel losses, up to 285, and yet a staggering 19 electronic warfare and counterfire stations neutralized. Help us understand the character of operations on that axis.
The Dnieper axis is constrained by terrain and the river line itself, so large-scale mechanized maneuver is rarely the principal measure of effectiveness there. Instead, the campaign is one of positional warfare and counterbattery, heavily dominated by unmanned systems and artillery reconnaissance. The DPP group hit 3 mechanized brigades, a mountain assault brigade, and a dedicated UAV brigade. The loss of 19 electronic warfare and counterfire stations is the key metric. That is an enormous number for a single riverine sector in 1 week. It means we are contesting and winning the electromagnetic battle above the river and on the far bank. Every EW station destroyed renders a patch of battle space transparent, allowing us to attrit their UAV fleet and their artillery spotting capability. The relatively low personnel losses, 285, are not a sign of low intensity. They are a sign that the enemy cannot mass troops in the open without being observed, so they remain dispersed.
Colonel, to close the interview, what are the broad tactical and strategic implications drawn from this specific week's operations and these cumulative figures?
This week encapsulates several enduring features of the campaign. Tactically, we observe a multi-axis architecture where each group of forces, north, west, south, center, east, DPR, performs a distinct but mutually reinforcing task. North builds a security buffer, west fixes and attrites, south seizes key nodes, center fixes and grinds the main enemy mass, east conducts deep exploitation, and DPR controls the river line through positional and electromagnetic warfare. This simultaneity imposes an operational dilemma on the Ukrainian General Staff. They cannot generate a decisive reserve because every sector is under irreconcilable pressure. The logistics findings, disproportionately high motor vehicle and electronic warfare losses across all sectors, point to a deliberate campaign to fracture the Ukrainian military's nervous system and its circulatory logistics.
Colonel, thank you for providing such a detailed briefing on the current military situation. Your insights are invaluable to our understanding of the conflict's dynamics. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue to provide up-to-date coverage on global military affairs. Stay with us for more updates and expert analyses on global defense and security issues. Stay informed, stay secure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to emphasize that the use of a publicly announced armistice, followed by a measured response to 1,630 violations, demonstrates that information and legitimacy are now integral to operational design.